Hello everyone, welcome back to Gelvin Valley as I crash into a tree here trying to start off harvest. We are still playing on this beautiful map created by Wild Wes for Farming Simulator 15. We are harvesting canola on our largest field, and you know what? I am coming up on my first round being done, and yeah, I'm trying to remember where I'm at as it's been a little time since I've recorded. So hey, check it out. Alright, so there, our first round is done, and we're starting with the next, and hopefully I will make some headway here in this half hour on this field. You know, we have, actually let me pause just a moment to check out the map and see where we're at. Alrighty, we have 18, we have 23, and 25, yeah, that's 25. And I seem to recall these two, I'm going to have to get a smaller combine. I don't know that I can go over there with the larger one. I might be able to do this, but I almost think there was a bridge over here that I couldn't surpass. So maybe while I'm here, let me check out my sheeps. Okay, they still have plenty to eat. Good, good, good. And as we can see, this is on a horrible slope, and if this was in real life, we'd be throwing seed out the back of the combine. But if we put it up here, maybe we don't notice that we are a little steep. Anyway, I really need to probably finish the conversation we've been having on this train mountain place that we visited. Oh, stop, come on. Oh, it's momentum when you head downhill. Evidence of how steep it is. Maybe what I ought to do is, instead of doing a square corner, is just turn uphill, clean up the little bits later. Anyway, I think in the past episode I was in the middle of our trip north of the Train Mountain place, which, as I've mentioned, has 2,200 acres and over 30 miles of track. And this is real life miles, and we were on our way kind of heading north on the property, and they were taking us up to a place where we would have a picnic lunch. And these are all things that this club, it's really a not-for-profit, a place, these are all things that volunteers have made and put in, and it's just impressive to see it as we were out there. And as we headed north, I can't remember if I mentioned this last time, I don't know if I did, but we went through a valley kind of headed up there, and railroads, as you know, a lot of times hug the bottom of the valleys. You know, the same constraints that apply to a real life railroad apply also to this one, where, you know, you can't just climb straight uphill with your track. You have to take a gentle grade at it, and you also need to be careful as you're going up and down the grade, you know, that if you're not carrying too much weight, that it doesn't get out of control for, you know, what the train's able to handle. But there was and when I say in a valley, I mean it rose, I could get the exact number, I'd have to look at a relief map, but it was, I would say, easily 500-600 feet to the top of the ridge. You know, we were down below, and looking up there, they pointed out to us that the original donor of the entire tract had another vision in mind for it, Yeah, he wanted the little trains, the miniature trains, but he also had a vacation destination in mind for people where they could literally stay there overnight. He was a collector of real life-size train cabooses, and I almost think that they told us that they have the world's largest collection of those. Seems kind of hard to believe. It didn't seem like that many, maybe 40, 50 of them total, all said. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of them that he had transported to the top of this ridge. How he got them up there, I haven't a clue. And they were scattered kind of out various places, and his vision was to turn them into bed and breakfast type places, where people, families could spend the night and that kind of thing. And, of course, government agencies, being what they are, they denied permits to turn these cabooses into dwelling places, if you will. And so, but by then, he already had all the cabooses kind of up on the ridge. Oh, dear. Alright, I'm going to have to run over a little bit of crop. I don't like doing that. Just to get turned around. Shameful, terrible. So, yeah, the government denied his application to do that. So now they sit up there kind of like just pieces, attractions, if you will, you can see from the train. And there's if you follow some deep links in Train Mountain's website, you can kind of look at some sister websites, if you will, where it has kind of future plans of additional track that they intend to put in, and some of that kind of thing. And they have plans at some point, given enough resources, volunteer help, etc., to eventually get track laid all the way to the top of the ridge. Now, it's going to switch back a little bit. It's going to be on a grade. They won't be able to go straight up the hill, but I don't know. If with with 30 miles of track already, it's just going to further cement their standing as the largest such place, in the world, with the growth plans that they have. And it makes me genuinely wonder if this place is number one. I wonder who number two is, the next largest location for this. So it was kind of cool. So we were riding down there to see all the cabooses up there and whatnot. And I maybe mentioned in the past, as we headed north of the main place for Train Mountain, we were kind of in a grove of aspen trees, a little bit of deciduous trees, and that eventually, I think that was kind of at the bottom of the gully, maybe where there was water coming through, enough to support, deciduous trees. And then we rose a little bit, and you got into more pine type trees, conifers, if you will. And they were a little more sparse, and as we went, they became very sparse. Namely, we started seeing burn marks on some of the trees, and then there were none. Where a forest fire had come through. They said the year, I don't remember what year it was, and about 600 acres of the 2,200 that they own ended up being destroyed by a forest fire. Just real unfortunate. And they're especially fortunate that it didn't continue south and destroy the whole park. But they were, talking about being in the process of replanting. They've already tried to replant and just hundreds of thousands of trees, but for whatever reason they didn't take. Maybe it was a dry year, so they apparently need to wait a little longer to replant. But the contrast was stark, we were riding the train and had the shade of the trees, and then all of a sudden we were out in the open and it was hot. The particular day we were out there, and so hopefully someday they're able to get it all reforested. I can't remember if I've related this particular account, but they have little stations along the way, for their trains. They had the tracks out there, so they'd have a couple what would appear to be buildings, and apparently when the fires were raging, there was firefighters in planes and other types of equipment up there dropping fire retardant, water, and all that sort of stuff. And they were given instruction to try to preserve structures. Let the trees burn if they have to, but try to take care of structures. Well, from the air, it is apparently harder to tell, that you're atop a miniature railroad than one would think. So they actually happened to drop some fire retardant on some of their miniature buildings, if you will. So they ended up preserving it, kind of just a little oasis, if you will, in the middle of this 600 acres, this just was scorched and now is nothing but open grassland. Previously they had, it was all forested in there, of course, and they had their little buildings in there, and that and a couple trees near it were the only things that survived, this fire. So just kind of interesting that was a blessing from above during the fire. They were able to keep that. Eventually, around noon, we ended up at the far end of their track, and it's a place called Hope Circle. It isn't even the far northern end of the property. Let me try to take this corner a little bit differently this time. There we go. I didn't fight the downhill side as bad. So they had a shelter built up there, fairly simple construction, but it had a roof over it, and oh my word, we all know there's uninvited guests to a picnic lunch, namely wasps, yellow jackets, those kind of things. They were just in abundance out there, so there must be a huge number of nests, nearby the shelter that they had, but the train driver basically, it's kind of giving up. She put out some meat, I think, on a table and a trap. So this one is for the yellow jackets, and we had the sandwiches and all that over there. So it was one way to kind of take care of the insects, if you will. And as long as we stayed in our area, they seemed to stay in theirs, and were contented. Although I gotta say, she's only feeding the population, to continue growing them. So after lunch, we headed back the way we had come, of course. This time taking a different route. There's at least 2 routes to get out to Hope Circle, and some of the track, as I was learning, they only have a short section anymore where it's intended for traffic to go both directions, apparently. In the old days, they had the switches set up so trains could go both ways on the same line. And now they have so much track, they've started to go just one direction, which maybe helps some of the efficiency of operations and how they set up all the signals and whatnot. So we kind of headed out, with a different route. I got better paint it. There we go. Head to our truck. Hop on down over the hill. This particular route home kind of took us up the hill a little bit, so we raised an elevation and then started coming back. And I gotta say, just before we reached the trees, because it was hotter than blazes out there, so And when I say hotter blazes, I don't know what it is in Celsius. It was above 90, I think. I don't recall exactly. By George, I'm going to fill this thing. Oops. Let me put this in, and I'm going to get him hired. And I'm going to go back here and probably do something here we'd never do in real life, which is head down over the hill with a heavy load. Actually, I probably could have gone up and around. Anyway, just before we reached the tree line, we had a mechanical breakdown. And it cost us probably about an hour of time. But that doesn't really matter to me. I was having a ball no matter what we were doing. But it happened. These trains, the one that we had, the engine, it sounded like a lawnmower motor is what was powering it. And there was a group of us there, and my father-in-law was along for the ride, and he walks with a cane. And as we were trucking along on the train, he accidentally dropped his cane. And so it dropped along the track, so we hollered and got she stopped really hard, the train driver, if you will, the engineer. And I think in the process of stopping hard, she broke something. I'm not sure what she broke, but she broke something. So we got stopped. I picked up the cane, got back on, and she tried to move and just couldn't. So thank goodness for cell phones, right? So she was calling some folks to come help her. And just like they would have to do in a real railroad, they sent another train, with a replacement engine for the one that was pulling our train, and it took them forever and a day to get there. And like I say, I didn't particularly mind it, other than it was hot, and we were a bit exposed. Where we were, there wasn't really any shade to speak of, so. But those things happen. All right, let me see. Can we see the? There we go. There's our plane moving up. It's gonna burp out the top. There we go. So, and I guess I didn't mention this part. Following lunch, they told me that I was going to be the train's conductor. And the conductor sits at the back end of the train and is responsible for making sure that all arms, limbs, and objects and so forth are all on the train before it moves. So the procedure was real simple. They gave me a whistle, and when the engineer was ready to go, she would give 2 blasts on the train horn, and I would check and make sure everybody was on, and then I would blow the whistle twice, which would then tell her that everything was safe to move. So this was all fine and dandy until we had to stop, of course, and I was given a new task because I think this, I don't know how often this happens. She did a really good job taking care of us and everything, so I have no complaints at all. Oh, let's see, this is just about full. But I think she had her hands full dealing with it all. So what she asked me to do, I hiked back on the rail, maybe a couple hundred feet, max 150 feet, and she said, watch for the replacement train that is coming, because kind of like I mentioned before, just like a real life train, they take it takes space for them to stop, and so I would need to flag them down Oops. Oh, shoot. I didn't mean to put on higher. There we go. It takes time for him to stop, just like a real life train. And so by seeing me, because, we kind of ended up behind a turn, and so they could come in too fast. So anyway, I had to stand out there in the heat and wait for the next train to come by, and it took a long time. I don't know how long I stood in place, probably close to half an hour, just waiting for the train to come. And it finally did, and it was kind of cool, just like in real life, how you can hear a train in the distance, as it clicks and clacks along to get there. You could hear it before you could see it. I think he even ran the horn a couple times. That was kind of neat to see it coming and then to flag it down. And so it was just interesting to see what they did to switch us, onto this new engine, a new engineer come to help out, and just how they handled an emergency procedure, if you will. And fortunately, we didn't have any health emergencies or that kind of stuff. When you serve GOQ public, you always wonder when when those things in life that happen and that are unintended and throw a monkey wrench in everything. Unfortunately, we didn't have anything like that happen. But all it takes is someone getting stung by one of those yellow jackets, and if they're allergic, and if they don't have an EpiPen, and your mind can do all sorts of somersaults, thinking of potential things that could go wrong. So they took us back the rest of the way, and we got back to the main grounds, and kind of south of the road, if you will, the bisects the property. Oops. Yikes. And the light's going. And they took us on what they call the Rio Grande Loop. They have them all named. They stopped by a caboose that I think came from the Rio Grande, which was a railroad here in the U.S. down south, probably at the border of the U.S. to Mexico. There's a river down there called the Rio Grande, and I think this caboose came from it. They're in the process of restoring it, kind of like with my comments earlier about all the cabooses that they have. They have a large collection, and this is part of their charitable mission, if you will, is maintaining a museum with some of this old equipment. So we went by there. There was another section of the train that they took us to, and this whole day, it's been on miniature trains, and they don't have a lot of buildings that are to scale, but they have some, and I gotta say, they're even smaller than what the correct scale would be, but it still looks so cool. They had what did they call it? They had a name for the town, and all of these small, they look like doll houses in some ways, the old school doll houses, only this was to represent kind of a frontier town, if you will, where some of the buildings were made of rough cut timber or look like that, and just 100% wood construction, painted. Most of the insides were finished. Some had miniature people standing in there, and it just looked really, really cool. They had all sorts of buildings. There was a farm scene, there was a dairy, they had a ranch, they had fences, they had all these miniature cows and horses. Some of the cattle were even at a broken area in the fence, were trying to get out, and that kind of thing. They had a windmill, they had a distillery, you could bring grain into. They had a mining section, where you could see a hole in the side of the hill, if you will, and just mining type equipment or houses, if you will, where the miners lived, other buildings where the ore would be processed. I don't know if they said what kind of ore it was. And then all the buildings you would expect to see in town, from the undertaker to the general store to the blacksmith, and just all these miniature structures that somebody, some team of people, has spent probably hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of hours, man hours, putting all those together and painting it up. And it just, I got lots of pictures I can't really show here in the middle of the video, but just fabulous bit of work in there. So we spent a fair bit of time looking at those, and then next took us to a oh, here's my notes. Lilyville is what it was called. We're only at a church too. Anyway, the next stop that they took us to, and again, we're riding this other miniature train en route to it. They took us to a place called Midway Circle, it was called. And this is a G scale area of the route. So most of the trains down here are the 1/8 scale. I'm not sure what the technical name is for that, but they also had a garden railway, which is the G for garden. And these aren't trains that you would ride, but they are trains, that you would see used outdoors and that kind of thing. Oh, something I'm just noticing here, when the combine is hired, it does not put down wheel tracks. Good to know. I guess that's helpful for horseplay. So by this time, it was fairly late in the afternoon. We had kind of a 4-hour drive home, so we decided not to go look specifically at the G scale layout, which would have been pretty cool to see. We'll save that for another time. Another time, as I can't even focus on my combining here. Oh, back. So, like I say, we'll save the ad for the next time, and they took us one last little trip, and they took us through an area called Serpentine, which is, as they try to climb the hills, even the main property, sits on a fair amount of elevation. And of course, it doesn't take much of elevation, when it comes to trains, to make a difference, but it kind of is shaped like a snake, so they called it Serpentine. And they had one long main tunnel that they took us through, kind of under their shop area, back to the main area. And that was where we spent the day. We knew we were going to spend the day, and had all these lovely adventures, if you will. There we go. Get that turned off. Yes, my contracts are ending. And there's a lot more exploring. I estimate, and granted, there was downtime, there was the picnic in the middle, but I estimate we only really traveled probably a third of the rails. Now, a lot of the rail network, of course, is going to run parallel to each other. There were places, where they had 4 rails abreast, or 2 to 4 of them. So that's probably included in the count. So even though we saw a third, or literally rode on about a third of the rail, we probably saw, I would estimate, 80% of it, if you will. But there's plenty more to explore, I think, there in another time. And I don't know, it's one of those hobbies that if you really wanted to get into, you'd have to commit to in a pretty big way. And some of these people have. The tour guide that took us around, she and her husband live up in Washington. I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but they're what did she tell me? Was it a 12-hour? I think it takes 12 hours to drive from their home in Washington to this train place. and they do it several times a year. They have a place down there where they, have an RV, I think permanently. They don't even take it home with them anymore. And I think he's on the board of directors of the organization, but a significant investment of time. And, I don't even know what he or she does for their day jobs. Maybe they're retired. Maybe to some people they would look at the ad and say, that's crazy. How could you take so much time? But I don't know. I have no idea that their family situation. It's just obvious they are dedicated to this particular hobby, if you will, this particular pastime, and it takes people like that to make something like that work for everybody else. I have a feeling, I don't know how many members this organization has as an not-for-profit or club, but I'd be willing to bet money 20% of the people that belong to it probably put in 80% of the work to take care of everything that needs taken care of. I mean, I just looked around and you see maintenance needs everywhere. Not that it wasn't in good shape. I mean, it was in excellent shape. I'm just saying it's going to take a lot of time and effort to maintain all that, and there's probably just a handful of people who do most of it, and then there's everybody else, which come along that pay their dues and enjoy the fruits of the labors of those that put it in. So, yeah, just looking over my notes, and I don't know that there's probably more that could be said, and I'll try to put a link down in the description so people can go check it out themselves. For anybody watching this that's overseas, hey, maybe someday you can make a trip to my backyard. My backyard is 4 hours away for us. Maybe you too can come see the world's largest miniature train park. Anyway, I will get off my train kick here once more. Thank you so much for listening and coming along as I sit here trying to exercise my voice while having fun with something even more fun than trains, namely harvesting canola and farming in general. So y'all have a wonderful day. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.